a Cleveland Jewish News production.
Developments in the state of Ohio versus Gregory J. Moore are ongoing. While the team behind Aliza, her story, makes every effort to include new information, it's possible that new developments have been reported since this episode was recorded. For up-to-date coverage from the Cleveland Jewish News, visit cjn.org/Sherman.
This episode contains audio depicting gun violence that some listeners may find disturbing.
In the early morning hours of September 18, 2016, police officers and sheriff's deputies in Sumter County, South Carolina, gave chase to Dontrell Carter. The 25-year-old had gotten into domestic disputes, first by assaulting his girlfriend, and soon after by exchanging gunfire with a family member. Carter was on the run and considered armed and dangerous. Authorities eventually caught up with him northbound on U.S. Route 521. Their blue lights were flashing, but Carter didn't stop. Instead, the chase ended when he wrecked down an embankment. He got out of the car and started shooting at the deputies with an AK-47. They returned fire. And this is dashcam audio from that encounter. No one was hit by those gunshots you heard, and Carter escaped into the woods. Neither search helicopters nor bloodhounds could locate him. Enter Anthony Gentili.
As things kind of went along, things got cold, and they weren't able to locate him by the conventional means, so they turned to digital means.
Almost every action in modern-day life, including crime, creates a digital trail. The truth about what happened doesn't disappear. It just gets buried in data. We've seen that in the Aliza Sherman case, which has several hard drives worth of information and potential evidence. What's needed in these cases are experts with the knowledge to dig out that truth. As a high schooler in Virginia, some 15 years before the Carter case, Gentili was into computer networking. Following several deployments in service to his country and several law office internships in service of his career pursuits, Gentili spent about 7 years in various local police roles. Eventually, his interest in computers and background in law enforcement led him to the South Carolina State Law Enforcement Division, or SLED, where he was hired to conduct electronic surveillance and digital investigations to apprehend fugitives and help find endangered people and missing children. That's where he was working in 2016 when the Dontrell Carter case landed on his desk.
That's when I really realized that someone so dangerous is out there, and the only people making any kind of active attempt besides there in that small area in South Carolina was myself and another agent. And me being the lead on that, we started thinking about different ways we could apply digital forensics to try to track this person.
Gentili and his partner first sought to monitor Carter's phone, but it had gone cold. They suspected it was a burner phone he'd stopped using. Then they turned to Facebook.
I found that 3 people close to the suspect had a friend in common who had no profile picture. Now, the name of that person did not bring it back to the suspect we were looking for, but the fact that they were all linked piqued my interest.
After a bit more digging, Gentili had enough info to request and legally obtain information about the account from Facebook. Turns out, Gentili's hunch was right. It was Carter. But now, they needed to find him, so Gentili focused on IP addresses. An IP address is a unique numerical label. Think of it like a digital street address assigned to a device connected to the internet or a network. It helps identify a device and allows information to be sent to and from it. Your cell phone, your laptop, your smart TV, even the device you're using to listen to this podcast, all use IP addresses.
Weeks went by until we were able to get one that came back to an internet service provider, such as Comcast. And when looking at that, sending the legal process to Comcast to try to figure out the subscriber for that IP address, we were able to get an address in Georgia, a state over.
Gentili solved the mystery, but things took a deadly turn after that. Investigators had an arrest warrant from the September shootout and domestic violence allegations back in South Carolina. Gentili contacted the U.S. Marshal's Office in southern Georgia. The morning of November 18, 2016, exactly 2 months after the initial incident, a task force visited the single-wide trailer in rural Long County. Marshals were invited into the home and interviewed 3 people inside. At some point, Dontrell Carter appeared and opened fire, killing U.S. Marshal Deputy Commander Patrick Thomas Carruthers, a 26-year veteran of the service. Task force officers returned fire and killed Carter. It wasn't the clear moment of celebratory justice Gentili had imagined, but the case had been solved. Carter had been found, in large part due to digital forensics.
In the end, everything was found and came to a culmination based on some really different type of digital forensic techniques that I used to get to that location. And so tragic event for everybody involved, and but just was such a large case and such an impact to so many people. And to know that along the way, it was just myself and a few other investigators looking, was just really drove me to continue to try to apply digital forensics in different ways.
I'm Sarah Shookman.
And I'm Mike Butts. You're listening to Aliza, Her Story, a Cleveland Jewish News podcast about Aliza Sherman's life, loss, and legacy. Welcome to episode 8. Sarah and I are both journalists who for years have reported on Aliza's story. We started this podcast in early 2023, 10 years after Aliza died, and worked together with the Cleveland Jewish News and Aliza's daughter, Jennifer Sherman, to bring you a deeper, better understanding of who Aliza was, to understand how she lived, not just how she died, and to share the change the Beechwood nurse and mother of 4 has inspired. Greg Moore, the attorney representing Aliza in her contentious divorce trial, who's now charged with her murder, says he's not guilty. Since his arrest in May 2025, we've been providing updates. We offer deeper coverage and context you can't get anywhere else. Our goal is to honor Aliza's life and legacy with transparency on the process of pursuing justice. Cuyahoga County prosecutors and Moore's defense are now preparing for a September 2026 trial, delayed in part because of the massive volume of evidence, most of it digital evidence, both sides are making sense of. Moore waived his right to a speedy trial in January. We've reached out to both sides asking them to participate in our podcast coverage, and right now, no one is talking. In our last episode, we heard from veteran defense attorney Larry Zuckerman. He touched on digital forensics, the practice of identifying, preserving, collecting, analyzing, and documenting digital evidence from electronic devices in a legally sound manner. It's not a fingerprint or DNA-laced murder weapon that's solving Aliza's murder. Expect the prosecutor's case against Greg Moore to be a tightly woven narrative built by digital forensics. Less visible, but potentially just as damning. Every text, every IP address, every timestamp, each detail is a domino, and everything depends on how well prosecutors can make them fall. Expect the jury to hear about text message exchanges, mobile hotspots, and multiple electronic devices, and how they interact with each other and the network. The phones everyone was using more than a decade ago will now be used to tell the story in the courtroom, including one phone prosecutors say has never been recovered. Defense experts have already been questioning the state's digital evidence. How do authorities obtain this digital information? How has this practice changed over the years? What techniques exist now that didn't back in 2013 when Aliza was murdered? Like you, we were curious.
These days, Anthony Gentili works for Invista Forensics, an international firm whose digital forensics services include comprehensive investigation and data acquisition from mobile devices, computers, servers, cloud platforms, complex networks, and other digital environments. It has offices around the world, including in Columbus, Ohio. In other words, digital forensics is a global business. Gentili is based in Columbia, South Carolina, as a digital forensics analyst.
I consult on a variety of types of cases and situations that involve digital forensic evidence and digital forensic analysis.
Gentili's work overlaps with that of Jake Green, a technical operations manager with Invista's digital forensics team based in Raleigh, North Carolina. We got to talk with both coworkers. Like Gentili, Green has a background in law enforcement. He spent 10 years on the force in Rock Hill, South Carolina, about 30 miles south of Charlotte. He was on the crime scene unit before later being sworn in as a special deputy U.S. Marshal assigned to the Electronic Crimes Task Force with Secret Service in Columbia, South Carolina. Along the way, he gained a reputation for uncovering hard-to-find evidence.
The big turning point was 2012 with the Democratic National Convention that came to Charlotte, North Carolina. Our team got connected with Secret Service, who offered us training and positions on their Electronic Crimes Task Force. So we got hooked up with them, went through a ton of trainings, was really fortunate to be able to be attached to them and learn from them. And then just wound up where I'm at now in 2016, decided to leave law enforcement to pursue a full-time path in digital forensics.
Green describes himself as a, quote, computer kid who loves taking things apart to figure out how they work. His predilection for taking apart technology serves him well at Invista.
Our office is set up primarily as a lab space where we can actually physically handle evidence. We can download cell phones. We can forensically examine computers. We can bring burned evidence in, places that we can take things apart and pull data from them. Clients come to us from criminal litigation, civil litigation, insurance, private companies, you name it. If somebody's got some issue with a cell phone, computer, a car, historic records, they come to us and ask us to help them better understand what their data is telling them.
While both Gentili and Green started in law enforcement, they now, more often than not, find themselves serving the needs of criminal defense attorneys.
Probably 99% of our work comes from criminal defense. So when you think of digital forensics and really forensic science as a whole, the government has built-in capabilities through law enforcement to do crime scene response, to do digital forensics, to do fingerprint analysis, all of those pieces. In the criminal defense space, they don't have anybody built in. They have to find people to come in and help, and that's really where we step into that realm.
Greg Moore and his defense team at Ryan, Ryan have hired Binary Intelligence for this exact work. Binary is based in Cincinnati and specializes in digital forensics and data recovery, extracting and analyzing electronic evidence ranging from cell phones and computers to network activity and metadata. Court filings show Moore's team is seeking broader access to the state's digital evidence so their experts can independently review and test the prosecution's findings. In a case expected to hinge heavily on technology, both sides appear to be preparing for a battle of digital interpretation as much as a battle of facts. There's little debate that the work digital forensics experts do at Binary and Invista is crucial to modern-day court cases. Digital evidence can make or break a trial, but so can how juries view and understand that digital evidence.
It's kind of difficult because not all jurors have the same usage of their phones. They may use their phones less frequently, more frequently. We may get some jurors on there that maybe they're older. Maybe they're used to their grandkids using their phones. Being able to take this digital aspect and turn it into something that really anyone's going to understand, that's the hardest part, is trying not to put a juror to sleep with the nuts and bolts of digital forensics and helping them better understand what the total picture is of why it matters.
Green related this to Greg Moore's trial.
We may not have had all of the digital evidence at the time of the murder, but being able to take that digital evidence as it sits now and articulate each of those pieces of evidence to a juror is really going to be key to helping them paint the picture. What do we have? What can we say? What can't we say with the current sets of evidence? And put that into a way that a juror is going to understand location and timing and things like that.
For attorneys to have digital evidence they can present to jurors, digital forensics companies like Invista, and law enforcement for that matter, must first gain access to what's on a device. They do so through a process called extraction. Gentili explains.
So an extraction is an image of a device. So making a copy of the device. So if you perform an extraction, that term describes extracting the data in the device. So if I were to extract a device, a cell phone device, then I'd be making a copy of everything within the device. There's no way to narrow it down when you do the extraction portion. There is a way to narrow now the investigation or to create reports from that are more narrow in scope, such as a week period or something. But when you do an extraction of a device, you take a copy of everything and pull it out. And I will say, not all extractions are created equal, in that some are more comprehensive than others.
In Greg Moore's case, gaining access has been especially relevant. Investigators have long had Aliza's iPhone, along with another iPhone Moore was using later in 2013, beginning in October of that year. But prosecutors say the phone Moore was using around the time of Aliza's murder in March 2013 has never been recovered. Remember the courthouse bomb threats for which Moore was convicted of inducing panic back in 2015? We discussed them in episode 3.2 of this podcast, which focused on Moore. According to court filings in the Aliza case, prosecutors believe Moore obtained a new phone and gained control of a mobile hotspot after learning he was under investigation for those bomb threats, generally unrelated to Aliza.
It could be part of what happened in this case because technology advances and the capabilities become greater than they were back then. And it's possible that in this case, they still maintained the device and they did another extraction recently, which provided more data. If you do multiple extractions, even of the same type, you may not get the same result.
During a February 2026 court hearing, Moore's defense attorneys requested and received access to his October 2013 iPhone. It was seized by investigators during an FBI search of the Stafford Law Company offices in 2014. The defense argued the phone needed to be independently examined by binary intelligence in order to properly prepare for trial.
Prosecutors have also revealed that they recently extracted additional records from another iPhone seized that day, this one belonging to Joe Stafford, Moore's former boss. You likely remember the name Joe Stafford from episodes 2 and 3.2 of this podcast. He's the high-profile Cleveland divorce attorney Aliza had originally hired, known as a tough, aggressive litigator she believed would fight for her in court.
He was an absolute shock.
This is how Aliza's friend Karen Chait described him to us in 2023.
He was known to be, and she knew that fighting Stanford needed a shock.
But in 2012, Stafford was suspended from practicing law after disciplinary findings tied to repeated delays and litigation tactics in divorce cases. That suspension thrust Greg Moore into a much larger role at the firm, inheriting a massive caseload that court documents and our own reporting describe as overwhelming.
In the case against Joe Stafford, an investigative news story published in the weekly alternative newspaper Cleveland Scene in November 2025, journalist Mark Oprea described a legal culture at the Stafford Law Company built around continuances, delay, and pressure tactics in contentious divorce litigation, the very environment in which Moore was trained. In a June 22, 2026 filing in the Aliza case, prosecutors also formally withdrew Joe Stafford from their witness list and notified the court they do not intend to call him, citing 3 letters Stafford signed and sent through his law firm.
That doesn't necessarily mean the jury won't hear from Stafford. The defense could still choose to call him as its own witness. We know prosecutors say Stafford's iPhone was only recently re-examined using newer forensic technology. The central theme is that, like with all things tech, a lot about extraction has changed in the 13 years since Aliza's murder and the investigation surrounding it. Here's Jake Green from Invista.
When we think of devices from 2013, 14, the level of extraction that we could get from those devices then was comparatively now was minimal. The amount of data that lives on these devices that we have access to now is really exponential. We have the ability to gather a lot more information about where somebody was, what were they doing, if we still have that physical, tangible device. It's like an iPhone. The amount of data that we can collect from that phone is probably 10 times more than what we could in 2013. We have the ability to capture what's called a full file system extraction from the phones. Even for older phones like this one, the ability to pull location data and contact information outside of what we usually can is leaps and bounds greater than it used to be.
Not only is more data now available, but digital forensics analysts can make sense of it much more quickly than before. Again, thanks to technological advancements. Remember, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation and Cleveland Police amassed more than 60,000 pages of documentation and, quote, several terabytes of information on external hard drives as they investigated Aliza's murder in 2013. Anthony Gentili suspects that improved and modernized processes helped bring charges 12 years later.
I'm not surprised that more data becomes available. I think some of the terms that were used was like the analysis or looking into what we already had. So it makes me feel like maybe the analysis of the large quantity of data was able to be narrowed in by like modern techniques now. And that could be simply just analysis programs now as they've progressed. I mean, when I started in 2015, we were using a program called MapPoint, which is a very, very simple Microsoft program to try to map cell site locations. So we were literally importing GPS coordinates by latitude and longitude as dots, and then using a screen protractor to drag them over the dot, create a 120-degree sector based on the center of the azimuth given in the records, and then drawing a line. So this come a long way since 2015 to 2013 to where now you can drag and drop records with programs that automatically will present this beautiful tower and sector for you. Those programs allow us to run frequency reports, allow us to run first and last reports. So how often do they hit this tower? How often does the phone start and end the day at the same tower, which could be an indication of where they slept? How often does this device go blank from the network, which I know is a big one in this case? So you can take such a large amount of data and run these reports now that you couldn't do automatically back in those days as easily.
Just to follow up on that, can you in the number of man hours, like how long might it have taken to do something in 2015 compared to that same thing you can do now?
Oh yeah, I mean in mapping a month of records, if we wanted to know where a device was for a month, back then you're looking at weeks of work for one individual to map the cell site, to show on a map where months worth of records are to really determine that pattern of life. Whereas now, with a set of records, you can do it in a matter of hours. Certainly.
Gentili and Green both have been in the digital forensics business for a while, long enough to see things evolve in their industry. The pace of technological change is fast.
It is night and day difference. We have grown exponentially in technology. When you look back at around 2007, 2008, when we started getting into smartphones, Android and early iPhones were right in that time period. We were all becoming connected to our devices, and now probably more connected than we wish we were. But our lives revolve around these cell phones. So we've now put our lives on it. So in the time between cell phones coming out, in this case, even those first few early years, the data that could live in Apple's iCloud now, still, there could be information on there that would be very helpful or pertinent to this case, in addition to the things like the cell phone records.
In Aliza's case, that evolution in technology could be critical. Human memories fade over time. Witness recollections blur. But in some cases, digital evidence ages differently, and in the process, it could reveal a clearer story. In a prosecution built heavily on electronic breadcrumbs, those technological advances could become central to how prosecutors try to tell the story of what happened to Aliza. Today, investigators and jurors might view the absence of digital evidence differently, too. A phone going dark, missing records, gaps in location data. Patterns that emerge when a device suddenly stops communicating, like Moore's did for 3 hours overlapping with Aliza's murder. It's what forensic analysts call a pattern of life. Turning off the phone conflicts with the typical pattern of life you'd expect to see during the time frame. In 2013, those details may not have stood out the same way they do now. Juries understand something differently too. Phones almost never disappear accidentally. Here's Anthony Gentili.
As technology progresses, also does public opinion, and so does what a jury would think. What would a jury think in 2013 about someone not having records at that time? They may not think much of it, but now something like that could be a big flag. As most people would agree that people take their phones with them everywhere. They take them to the bathroom while they go to the bathroom. The time period now has changed the way we look at digital evidence and the importance of digital evidence, and whether that be the lack of history or the history itself.
The University of Idaho murders in 2022 caught the world's attention. In the early morning hours of November 13th, 4 students were fatally stabbed in an off-campus house. Their killer was arrested 47 days later on December 30th in northeast Pennsylvania. How did authorities track him down? With the help of digital forensics. Through tips and video surveillance footage, police identified a Hyundai Elantra that had been driven around the victim's house at the time of the crime. They eventually connected the car to a Washington State University PhD student, someone studying criminology, who lived in a neighboring town. When authorities dug deeper, they found that the PhD student's cell phone stopped connecting to the network before the murders and then reconnected after the murders in a town several miles away. Cell phone data also showed that the PhD student's phone connected to a tower near the victim's residence at about 9 a.m., approximately 5 hours after the killings. In what appeared to be a pattern of life change for the Idaho suspect, investigators believed he turned off his cell phone the night of the murders in order to try to avoid detection. Prosecutors in Greg Moore's case believe Moore did something similar. The indictment alleges Moore disconnected his phone from its Verizon cellular network and used a Stafford Law Company-issued mobile hotspot to mask his location, thus avoiding detection.
Remember on March 24, 2013, Moore arranged for Aliza to meet him at 4:30 at the Stafford's Erie View Plaza offices. Moore used his electronic access to open the building's front door at about 3:51 p.m., but either never entered or left before 4:07 p.m., and he was not inside the building again until 7:30 p.m., according to the indictment. He sent a series of text messages that brought Aliza downtown from her Beechwood home, but delayed their meeting, at one point keeping her waiting outside the law offices for about an hour. Aliza believed Moore to be inside waiting to meet with her, and while she waited outside to be let in, she was attacked and stabbed to death. The indictment accuses Moore of continuing to text and call Aliza at least 9 times after she was attacked about 5:22 p.m. to create, quote, false evidence that Moore was unaware of Sherman's assault. Again, those texts were allegedly sent with the help of a hotspot. Months earlier, prosecutors say Moore obtained control of the hotspot and began using it after learning he was under investigation for phoning in bomb threats to local courthouses. In other words, investigators believe the technology was not incidental. They believe it was part of a plan.
If it's a portable unit, it's something that's as small as a cell phone. It has the ability to receive a cellular signal and turn it into a wireless signal for other devices to connect to.
That's Jake Green from Invista providing context. He then referred to the Stafford hotspot.
So say this company didn't have internal Wi-Fi and they only wanted to use this puck or hotspot. That hotspot could go with them when they walk into the courthouse. We see that oftentimes, that courthouses are notorious for having bad internet or no public internet. So taking that hotspot with you, you may be able to take it and go really anywhere.
What information can digital forensics analysts get from a hotspot? Here's Anthony Gentili.
What you can do is determine what devices have connected to that hotspot. You also will have an IP address range that's given to that hotspot to assign to transactions that occur to devices connected to that hotspot. So if you know that block of IP addresses and you see that show up in transactions that occurred on a device that's identified by the hotspot, then you can really figure all that out together. That can go together to really paint a good picture for you as to who was using it, what device was using it, what times were they using it. So you can get a lot from a hotspot, yes.
Would investigators have been able to get all of that back in 2013 when this happened, or has the ability to get that information improved since then?
Yes, you would have been able to get that information then. It would have likely come from the provider. So whoever provided the internet service to that hotspot device, you would have done legal process to them to receive it. As far as extracting that individual device, it depends on what that device was. If it was a cell phone or a small mobile device, it'd be very easy to do an extraction of that. And so that was available back in 2013. But at the least, you would have requested records from the provider to see everything you could, ask for everything you could on that device, yes.
The indictment describes the Stafford hotspot as a, quote, Verizon business account 4G mobile broadband device.
A lot of personal information that could be associated to that, especially it being a legitimate company such as Verizon. In that time, Verizon was one of the premier cell phone providing companies, more so than T-Mobile is now. But subscriber information would be the big one that investigators would use to kind of go down that trail and now figure out who. But the large majority of that data coming back would be in an IP connection log. And that would have IP addresses used for time periods for different devices. And it may identify an IMEI, International Mobile Equipment Identity, which would be assigned to a device. And so if we have an extraction of a device, we're going to have the IMEI, which is to that device. And then if we have that log show up in the records, the connection log records of the hotspot, then it further shows which devices were connected at that time.
The court filings and testimony before Judge Kira Krivosh show the case against Greg Moore won't hinge on a single source. Instead, prosecutors are assembling an entire ecosystem of digital evidence: phones, hotspots, cloud records, device extractions, carrier logs, and electronic access records. Investigators are comparing multiple streams of information against one another: which device connected where, and when for critical moments in time, and whether records pulled from phones, cloud backups, and service providers show the timeline prosecutors say unfolded that day.
So that brings up two thoughts. Is one, perhaps we do have some type of Apple iCloud data that they've gotten for the defendant. Maybe that shows some of the network connectivity and turning off from Verizon, turning on to Wi-Fi. The other potential location for evidence in that case would be from the actual business itself, showing that he did connect to their Wi-Fi. So that's another piece that law enforcement could have gotten. If this was historic records that we're getting from the cell phone carriers, that means that law enforcement most likely preserved this way back when. It didn't know what to do with it. And now somebody has gained the insight and the expertise and be able to analyze these records.
In many ways, connection itself is how investigators say they're connecting the dots. The defense appears poised to challenge not only what this data shows, but whether investigators interpreted it correctly in the first place, and whether some of it was even legally obtained. Court filings from April and May 2026 suggest the defense is scrutinizing the search warrants, the forensic methodology, and the underlying assumptions investigators used to build the state's digital timeline. In a case increasingly built around digital breadcrumbs, the fight may ultimately come down to whether those breadcrumbs actually point to where prosecutors say they do, and if the evidence will survive scrutiny in court. Like in the Idaho case, investigations are no longer focused only on where a phone appears, but when it suddenly disappears. Greg Moore's pattern of life will be on trial. Here's Anthony Gentili again.
So if, again, we're running these reports and we're coming up with a pattern of life, and this person has not been shielded from the network, or has usually taken calls during this time. And now we have nothing during this one period of time when this crime occurred. That can be just as important as having a location at the scene.
Digital silence tells a story.
One place where there's been little silence is Judge Krivash's courtroom. Some time has passed since our last episode of Aliza, Her Story, so let's catch up. Though the trial is still a few months away, critical decisions are happening now. With new motions and filings, more details are emerging about the evidence each side believes matters most. The volume of new evidence led Judge Krivash to delay motion hearings previously set for June. Those hearings were scheduled to take place July 29th and July 30th, precisely while we are recording this episode. These hearings are when Judge Krivash will determine what evidence jurors will ultimately be allowed to hear, one of the most impactful phases before trial. There are several arguments, including the defense's efforts to suppress evidence. Be sure to visit cjn.org/Sherman for timely updates. Moore's lead attorney, John Paul Ryan, challenged key pieces of the state's evidence on multiple fronts. He requested a Franks hearing, arguing investigators may have included misleading or incomplete information in warrant affidavits. He also requested a Daubert hearing, challenging whether some of the state's forensic methods and expert conclusions meet the legal standards required to be presented to a jury.
In early July, Greg Moore added veteran criminal defense attorney Christopher Buccio to the case as co-counsel. Buccio is considered a well-known trial lawyer from the Dayton area, and his addition gives the defense another experienced courtroom attorney as the case heads toward trial. The defense also attempted to redirect suspicion toward Aliza's late husband, Dr. Sanford Sherman. In an April 2026 filing opposing the Franks hearing, prosecutors argued there was no credibility to an anonymous 2022 tip claiming Sanford Sherman confessed to killing his wife. According to that filing, Ohio BCI agents traveled to Florida and interviewed the nurse manager identified in the tip, who told investigators of Sanford, quote, "The patient never said anything related to the homicide." Prosecutors said additional interviews with Sanford Sherman's acquaintances similarly failed to support the allegation, and that he repeatedly denied involvement before his death in 2024. Both the prosecution and defense have agreed to review grand jury transcripts typically kept in secret. Those materials include transcripts connected not only to Aliza's murder investigation, but also the 2012 courthouse bomb threats tied to Moore. Whether any portion of those records ultimately becomes public remains a decision for Judge Krivash.
All of this points to a case becoming more technically complex by the month. There's more detail playing out in civil court as well. A civil lawsuit filed in late April by Aliza Sherman's family alleges Stafford Law employees and others may have played a broader role than previously understood. The lawsuit alleges that after Joe Stafford learned Greg Moore was under investigation for making courthouse bomb threats in late 2012, individuals connected to Stafford Law helped Moore obtain that new cell phone and the mobile hotspot that court documents say were part of the firm's Verizon business account. Prosecutors specifically cited those digital extractions when requesting additional discovery time late last year, warning the court they did not seek the extension lightly because it would, quote, necessarily extend all future dates in the case. What's clear now is that this case has entered its most complex stage. What evidence will ultimately be presented to a jury, and what additional litigation could still reshape the case before opening statements begin? This case continues to move quickly. While we'll keep telling the story here, the most current information will always be available at cjn.org/Sherman. One thing is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Investigators believe the answers to what happened to Aliza Sherman may have been sitting quietly inside years-old digital evidence all along.
Aliza, Her Story is produced by the Cleveland Jewish News. The executive producer is Kevin S. Adelstein. Today's episode was produced by Mike Butts, Courtney Burns, Stephanie Holmes, and me, Sarah Schuckman. It was edited by Stephanie Holmes and written by Mike Butts and me. Cover art design by Bella Bendo and Jessica Simon. Our theme music is Particles by Nobu. Additional music included in this episode is by Masterminded and Hezkill Roz. The Sumter County dashcam audio from 2016 is courtesy of WIS TV. To learn more or to support the Aliza Sherman Fund, visit give.ccf.org/Aliza Sherman Fund. To read more about Aliza's story and listen to the other episodes in this series, visit cjn.org/podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening.